Pope Benedict ordained several new archbishops on the Feast of the Epiphany, including his own personal secretary. Youth from around Europe had a special prayer service with the Holy Father just in time for New Year's, and the Vatican is having some banking problems. We'll explain why coming up. Hello, Merry Christmas, and welcome to the first Vatican Connections of 2013. In post-Christmas tradition, Pope Benedict XVI met with members of the Vatican's diplomatic corps on Monday, and just one day earlier he celebrated Mass for the Solemnity of the Epiphany of our Lord. Now we'll have more about what he said at those two events later on in the program. You may have heard that the Vatican is having some banking problems, so let's get to the bottom of it. What happens is that the Vatican partners with Deutsche Bank in order to carry out credit card and debit transactions at its shops and also to carry out all of its international transactions. Now, the Italian Central Bank pulled Deutsche Bank's permission to operate in Vatican City because it said Vatican City has a total lack of legislation regarding international financial transactions. Not only does that violate European Union laws, but it makes the Vatican susceptible to money laundering. As of December 31st, its permission was pulled, and on January 1st, debit and credit transactions would not go through at the Vatican, and ATMs would not be able to handle transactions with foreign debit cards. That's any card that was not a Vatican bank card. Father Federico Lombardi, the Vatican spokesperson, said that talks are currently underway with another service provider, and the disruption in this service should be short-lived. Many church watchers have been waiting to see what would happen next in talks between the Vatican and the Society of Pius X. Well, the road to reconciliation has gotten bumpy again. On December 28th, the Superior General of the Society gave a talk at Our Lady of Mount Carmel Academy in New Hamburg, Ontario. During that talk, Bishop Bernard Follet said that for the last 3 years, he's received mixed messages from the Vatican about the Society's possible reconciliation with Rome. A hardline statement would be made publicly, and then insiders close to the Pope, would tell him not to worry, that the public statements did not reflect the Pope's true feelings. In the 2-hour talk in December, Follet also said that Jews, Masons, and modernists are opposed to the Society being brought back into communion with Rome, and he referred to them as enemies of the Church. Follet said there are things about the Second Vatican Council that the Society accepts and things they reject, but if reconciling with Rome means that the group cannot talk about the things they believe are wrong with Vatican II, then they will not accept reconciliation. Now, the U.S. chapter of the Society released a statement clarifying the use of the term enemies. But the Vatican's spokesperson, Father Federico Lombardi, told Catholic News Service it is absolutely unacceptable to define Jews as enemies of the Church. And no comment was made about Follet's claims that Vatican officials assured him the Pope was in favor of the Society's reconciliation with Rome, or about the present state of discussions with the Society. Now, before Christmas, we introduced you to something called the Taizé community, an ecumenical community based in Taizé, France. After Christmas, young people from around the world who are affiliated with the community gathered in Rome for a week-long gathering. And it ended with a special prayer service at St. Peter's Square, led by Pope Benedict himself. Vatican Television Center has more.
Dear young friends, Christ does not distance you from the world. He sends you out there where his light is missing, so you may bring it to others. This was Benedict XVI's message to tens of thousands of young people from all over Europe gathered in St. Peter's Square on Saturday night.
Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed.
An estimated 40,000 young people took part in the Taizé community's 35th Pilgrimage of Trust this year. Each Christmas season, the pilgrimage takes in one of the continent's major cities. This year, the young people are being hosted by the parishes and families of Rome from December 28th to January 2nd, led by Brother Alois, prior of the ecumenical community. The theme for the pilgrimage is uncovering the wellsprings of trust in God. In his address Saturday evening, the Pope told the youth, with your attention to a more equitable distribution of the earth's goods, your commitment to justice and a new human solidarity, you will help those around you better understand how the gospel leads us both to God and to others. So with your faith, you will contribute to the establishment of trust on earth.
Early in December, the Pope joined Twitter, and since then he has tweeted 20 times. Mostly they're excerpts from general audiences and Angelus addresses. Earlier this week, he launched a tweet asking followers to join him in praying for constructive dialogue in Syria. He also tweeted, "Nigerians have a special place in my heart, as so many have been victims of senseless violence in recent months." Pope Benedict also reached a milestone in 2012. He has hosted the bishops from every country in the world, every bishops' conference in the world. In an interview with the Vatican newspaper, Archbishop Lorenzo Baldisseri of the Congregation for Bishops said when the Pope completed the ad limina visits with the bishops of France in November, he had hosted every bishops' conference in the world. And now he can start the whole cycle over again by meeting with the Italian bishops this year. Now, it's canon law that the Pope must meet with the bishops of the world every 5 years. Archbishop Baldisseri, however, explained that the firm rule is that the Pope must meet with all the bishops of the world, but it's not always possible to do it in 5 years. This time, it took 7 years to complete the cycle. And what's more, it turned out that this article wasn't entirely accurate. It turns out the bishops of Holland are still waiting for their first ad limina visits with Pope Benedict. The U.S. bishops made their ad limina visits in 2012, so they won't have to do that again for a while. And the Canadian bishops last visited the Pope in 2006, so expect dates for their next visit to be announced in the next year or so. Did you know the Taizé community has held their European meeting in Rome 3 times in the last 34 years? All 3 times, the meeting featured a gathering or prayer service with the Pope. Earlier we mentioned that the Taizé gathering that was held in Rome after Christmas, and the prayer service led by Pope Benedict XVI with the participants in that gathering. Now, not everyone knows what Taizé is, so earlier I spoke to our very own Sister Marie Noel and Carlos, who have first-hand experience with Taizé, and I asked them about their first encounter with the community.
When I was there, I went with a friend who was not Christian at all, and because it's open, you can have questions, you can not believe in God, but you can meet people who believe, and we can discuss. And I remember I discussed with someone in Sierra Leone, a very poor country, very tough time. So it's opened my mind, you know. And also it was very simple. We live very simply. We sleep in a big tent, you know, and we eat not a lot. But you just feel you are with people, and we want to pray for peace, and we want to find what is the gospel, what is Jesus, you know. And it's really helped me being a sister after, you know.
Well, what about you, Carlos? What was your first meeting with Taizé?
In 2001, the meeting, the European meeting, or now the international meeting of Taizé, happened in Lisbon. And after that, Portugal started kind of surrendering to this prayer community who brought this spirit on the middle of a big city, have thousands of young people praying, was something who attract the other young people of the country. I was not on the meeting, but after that we had this idea: why not start prayer of Taizé every month? In 2011, before I went to Madrid for the World Youth Day, we had nothing less than 150 people getting together on a church every month. And now I know they change it from Tuesdays Tuesday night to Friday night, so more people can come, because it's not the thing of tomorrow I need to work or I have to university, because there are now more or less 1,000 people gathering.
Why do you two think that Taizé is so powerful? Why does it attract so many people?
I think it's because you have beautiful songs and you have silence, and there is not so much space of silence, and also you can sit on the ground, it's not with bench, so it makes you more relaxed in a way and more simple. And also the reconciliation, the brothers really pray for reconciliation, and they are from Protestant and Catholic, and something open, I think for that it attracts.
And the good thing of the Taizé community, they don't ask you, they don't tell you, you need to come. You can be on the community and don't go to the prayer. You don't need to pray with the all people, you can pray alone by yourself. And I think that's what attracts people to Taizé. There's nothing obligatory to do. They just ask you to pray, and if you want to pray.
Okay, so one last question. What should someone expect if they go to a Taizé prayer night?
You repeat the songs, and you repeat in Latin, in Spanish, in English, in French, the same word, not the word, but like a sentence of Psalms, or a sentence of Saint Thérèse d'Avila, like nada te turbe, nothing must trouble you, something like that. And you repeat something, so it makes you more relaxed, more open to God who is talking to you.
What I call to the Taizé prayer is simplicity. There's no big thing, there's no big show, there's no... even the musics are simple, are easy to play everywhere in the world. There's no, you can do it with an orchestra. Yes, you can do it, but you don't need it. You can just sing along, and it's simple. It's easy, simple, and really profound. Like Sister said, it's just repeating. And you start, it's a good exercise. If you start repeating a sentence a lot of times, you will start feeling it inside of you, and that's their point.
If you're interested in learning more about the Taizé community or how to host a Taizé prayer night at your parish, visit the official website, taizé.fr. It seems the Vatican wanted to tie up some loose ends before the end of the new year, and so there were a lot of appointments before 2013 came in. So let's take a look at what those were and who's going where. So, under the nominations category, we have Father Robert Oliver of Boston has been appointed the Promoter of Justice for the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Now, you might recall that the previous Promoter of Justice was recently made Auxiliary Bishop of Malta. That was back in October. Father Oliver is currently the Assistant for Canonical Affairs to the Vicar General at the Archdiocese of Boston. Archbishop Nicholas Thevenin was ordained to the episcopate on the Feast of the Epiphany and then appointed Nuncio to Guatemala. You'll recall that just before Christmas, his elevation to the rank of Nuncio and Archbishop was announced by the Vatican, and now we know where he'll be going to represent the Holy Father. And of course, the Diocese of Prince George in northern British Columbia has a new bishop. Pope Benedict accepted the resignation of Bishop Gerald Wiesner as he turned 75 and appointed Msgr Stephen Jensen of Vancouver to take over that diocese. Until now, Msgr Jensen has been serving as the Vicar General of the Archdiocese of Vancouver. That's been his role since 2009. The Diocese of Prince George has over 49,000 Catholics and 37 parishes and some beautiful, beautiful scenery. Also in the U.S., Msgr David Talley of Atlanta has been appointed Auxiliary Bishop of Atlanta. And looking at the resignations category, 74-year-old Archbishop Patrick Kelley of Liverpool, England, has announced that he will be retiring. Archbishop Kelley suffered a mild stroke recently, and although his recovery has gone well, in a letter he wrote to the priest of the Archdiocese for Christmas, he said he feels he must submit his resignation. The one thing that remains is for the Pope to accept his resignation. Vatican Connections is interactive. We answer your questions and explain things you want to know. You can reach us on Twitter at VatiConnections or by email at info@saltandlighttv.org. We'll try our best to answer your questions during this part of our show. As we mentioned, Pope Benedict took part in 2 post-Christmas traditions this past week. On Sunday, he celebrated Mass for the Epiphany of our Lord at St. Peter's Basilica, and at the same time, he ordained 4 new archbishops, among them none other than his own personal secretary, Georg Ganswein. Archbishop Ganswein will keep his job as personal secretary to the Holy Father and take on a second role as prefect of the papal household, a role which comes with the elevation to the rank of archbishop. In his homily, the Holy Father compared the 3 wise men on their journey to the new bishops and their mission. He said, like the Magi, the bishops should not be content with their position, but they should want to be seized by God and gripped by concern for men and women. He also said bishops must know that seeking the truth is more important than the taunts of this world, and they have to have the courage to go against the prevailing mindset. Pope Benedict added that the humility of faith will always go against the prevailing wisdom of those who cling to what seems right. On Monday, the Holy Father met with foreign ambassadors accredited to the Holy See. He told the diplomats that there can be no peace without God, because without openness to the transcendent, human beings easily fall prey to relativism and find it difficult to work and act justly and work for peace. He pointed out the difference between true religion, which connects people to God and therefore to each other, and what he called religious fanaticism, which he said has claimed victims in some of the countries that were represented at that audience. The Pope reiterated the Vatican's support for a 2-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and assured Egyptians of his prayers during this time when new institutions are being established in that country. He mentioned the financial troubles in Europe and voiced dismay over the widening gap between rich and poor in Europe. Speaking about religious freedom, he said taking away people's right to object to government policies on the grounds of conscience does little more than open the door to intolerance and forced uniformity. Then on Wednesday, at the general audience, Pope Benedict talked about Christmas, which technically runs until the feast of the baptism of the Lord. He said, since everyone experiences joy when they receive a gift from the heart, Christians should be in absolute awe at Christmas time. He reminded that Christmas is about the gift that God gave humanity, his Son. He also said, the phrase, "Word became flesh," is repeated so often, and the Christmas season comes with so many extra things to prepare, that Christians often lose sight of this gift. The Incarnation shows that God doesn't just communicate with humans, but he enters into our history and takes on the struggles and the weight of human life. Finally, this week, the Pope's message for the World Day of the Sick was released. He thanked people who take care of the sick and the elderly and expressed his affection to people who are going through a difficult time due to illness and suffering. He said the Gospel account of the Good Samaritan shows us how Jesus expects his disciples to behave towards others, especially towards those in need. The World Day for the Sick takes place on February 11th, and many parishes and dioceses will hold special masses on that day. Check with your parish to find out how you can participate in a Mass and a blessing on February 11th. And it's that time again. It's time for a Roman profile. This time we're looking at one of the Vatican and history's greatest treasures, the Sistine Chapel. Most people visit the Sistine Chapel as part of their tour through the Vatican museums. It's easy to forget that aside from being an art treasure, it is a functional chapel with a long history behind it. The chapel gets its name from the Pope who had it built, Pope Sixtus IV. In 1475, Sixtus commissioned Giovanni de' Dolci to design him a chapel for papal prayer services and meetings of the papal court. Once completed, Pope Sixtus commissioned Botticelli, Ghirlandaio, and Cosimo Rosselli to decorate the chapel. The ceiling of the newly completed Cappella Sistina featured a dark blue sky sprinkled with stars. It stayed this way well into the 1500s. By the time Sixtus's nephew, Giuliano della Rovere, became pope in 1503, the chapel was suffering from wear and tear. Pope Julius II commissioned Bramante to fix the structure of the chapel and Michelangelo to decorate the newly refinished space. Michelangelo had trained in frescoes and sculpture in Florence and was making a name for himself as a sculptor. Pope Julius commissioned him to sculpt what would eventually be his tomb, but then decided to have Michelangelo decorate the newly refurbished Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo refused and left for Florence, only to have local authorities send him back at the Pope's request. So it was that Michelangelo ended up painting the ceiling and north wall of the Sistine Chapel, covering the starry sky with a majestic representation of the creation of man and scenes from the book of Genesis. From its earliest days, the chapel was used for meetings of the papal court, which was made up of about 220 people. Conclaves are still held in the chapel, and until recently, consistories to create new cardinals were also held under the gaze of Christ at the Last Judgment. Today, up to 20,000 people visit the chapel every day as part of their tour of the Vatican museums. The chapel serves its original purpose once a year when the Pope baptizes the children of Vatican residents and employees during a special Mass in January. That's all for this edition of Vatican Connections. Now, this weekend is the Feast of the Baptism of the Lord, and Pope Benedict XVI will celebrate Mass in the Sistine Chapel and baptize the babies of Vatican employees. Salt and Light will be airing that Mass this Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern and 9 p.m. Eastern. Join me and Andrew Santos for full coverage of this special event. Of course, we'll bring you highlights from that Mass on next week's edition of Vatican Connections. Thank you for watching, and from everyone here, see you next time.